Throughout history, every empire has made bold claims about the security of its currency. Governments consistently assure their citizens that their promises will endure indefinitely. Yet, time and again, history reveals the fallibility of such assertions. From the ancient Roman Empire to modern-day Lebanon, populations have awakened to find their savings diminished, salaries rendered meaningless, and futures snatched away by systems they once believed to be trustworthy. Financial collapse is not an anomaly. Rather, it has become a prevailing norm. The critical question is not whether financial systems will fail, but rather how individuals can shield themselves when such failures occur. The illusion of permanence stands as perhaps the most perilous financial misjudgment one can make. We tend to gaze at our bank balances and national currencies with a sense of invulnerability. However, money itself is not a steadfast foundation. It is merely a manifestation of trust, a form of trust that can evaporate in an instant. In the middle of the 14th century, Europe found itself ravaged by an unprecedented pandemic known as the Black Death. Between the years of 1347 and 1351, nearly half of the continent's population perished. Cities were left desolate, villages vanished entirely, and trade routes fell into disarray. However, the economic narrative surrounding this catastrophe is far more intricate than mere devastation. The disappearance of such a significant portion of the workforce resulted in labor becoming incredibly valuable. Those who survived were able to command higher wages for their work. Food and land, which had previously been scarce resources, suddenly became relatively plentiful compared to the dwindling human population. Families fortunate enough to possess liquidity, whether in silver, goods, or simply in their ability to labor, found themselves wielding influence they had never previously imagined possible. Land that had once commanded exorbitant prices could now be acquired for mere pennies on the dollar. Abandoned homes dotted the landscape, fields remained untouched by plow or harvest, and survivors stepped into a buyer's market. If this scenario feels eerily familiar, it is because we have witnessed a modern iteration of it during the COVID-19 pandemic. Supply chains faced significant disruptions as governments printed trillions of dollars to prevent an economic halt. This led to a surge in inequality. Those with liquidity seized opportunities to acquire assets while those living paycheck to paycheck fell further behind. In the United States, housing prices skyrocketed while stock markets rebounded almost instantaneously. Meanwhile, millions struggled just to make rent payments. The parallels are striking. Pandemics tend to redistribute wealth in profound ways. This pattern has persisted throughout history. Survivors of the Black Death leveraged scarcity to ascend the social ladder. Similarly, those who emerged from the COVID crisis with financial reserves snapped up real estate, stocks, and businesses that others could no longer sustain. The lesson here may not be comforting but remains undeniably true. Crises tend to reward individuals with resources while punishing those without them. While pandemics illustrate how swiftly upheavals can alter economies, they also underscore another crucial reality. Institutions perceived as too big or stable to fail can collapse like a house of cards. During the 1340s, Florence stood as Europe's financial epicenter, a city home to powerful banking families like the Bardas and Peruzzis. These institutions were seen as pillars of stability within an otherwise turbulent world. Yet even they were not immune to failure when faced with overwhelming challenges. As we reflect on these historical events and their lessons for contemporary society, it becomes clear that preparedness and resourcefulness are vital in navigating through periods of uncertainty. The ebb and flow of fortune during crises reveal deep truths about wealth distribution and societal structure that remain relevant today. In conclusion, whether through plague or economic turmoil, history teaches us about resilience amidst adversity. As we face our own trials and tribulations in modern times, let us remember these lessons from our past, acknowledging both the fragility of institutions and the potential for opportunity hidden within moments of crisis. These financial institutions once provided substantial loans to monarchs, with King Edward III of England suffering the most catastrophic consequences when he was unable to repay colossal debts incurred during his wars against France. As Edward ceased his payments, the banks faced bankruptcy, leading to the ruin of countless depositors. The once thriving trade came to a halt, and Florence, which had enjoyed a reputation as a wealthy and powerful city, found itself plunged into chaos. Ordinary citizens who had placed their trust in the influential banking dynasties soon realized that size does not equate to security, and a reputable name offers no real protection. What lesson did people glean from this calamity? The notion that institutions are too big to fail is an age-old deception that has persisted throughout financial history. These entities exist primarily for profit rather than for ensuring individual survival. When they collapse, they do not hesitate to take your hard-earned savings along with them. This grim lesson has repeated itself across centuries, from the downfall of the Florentine Empire to the collapse of Lehman Brothers in 2008 and the freezing of bank accounts in Lebanon in 2019. Only those who grasp that institutional promises hold value only until they don't will manage to navigate such treacherous waters. This is precisely why historical lessons are both merciless and invaluable. Each economic collapse leaves behind a trail marked by insights, patterns, and warnings about what genuinely safeguards wealth versus what can easily turn to dust. A closer examination reveals that those who manage to survive these calamities are often not the ones who placed blind faith in established systems. Instead, they were typically the first to harbor doubts. The American Civil War is often remembered for its dramatic battles, intricate politics, and the momentous abolition of slavery. Yet beneath the surface of gunpowder and impassioned speeches lay a brutal financial war that most Americans today barely comprehend. Both the Union and the Confederacy quickly discovered that warfare on such an extensive scale necessitated the printing of money. In the North, the government issued greenbacks, a form of paper currency backed not by gold reserves, but by the promises made by the United States government itself. Initially, this bold experiment seemed both patriotic and revolutionary. However, as more greenbacks flooded into circulation, their purchasing power dwindled significantly. Inflation began eroding their value at an alarming rate, leading to widespread distrust among citizens. Meanwhile, conditions were even more dire in the South. The Confederacy, grappling with desperate shortages of resources, resorted to printing graybacks in staggering amounts. By war's end, inflation levels in Confederate territories reached nearly unimaginable heights. Prices surged by thousands of %, while soldiers found it increasingly difficult to purchase even basic provisions. Soldiers' paychecks had lost their worth before they could even spend them. Families found themselves carrying bags filled with currency that could scarcely buy a loaf of bread. By 1865, Confederate currency was not merely weak. It had effectively ceased to exist as a viable medium of exchange. In this financial catastrophe, tangible assets proved far more significant than any paper promises made by institutions. Real assets such as land, food supplies, and gold held undeniable value while money itself became nothing more than a cruel joke. For ordinary Southerners caught in this turmoil, it was utterly devastating. Years of savings evaporated into dust almost overnight. Conversely, for opportunists with access to physical goods and resources, the war presented an unprecedented chance to seize property and wealth at remarkably low prices. The stark contrast between those who suffered immensely due to economic instability and those who capitalized on it paints a vivid picture of how financial systems can impact lives during times of crisis. Understanding these dynamics remains crucial as history continues to unfold around us today. This is a lesson that many in the United States rarely hear, yet it is one that should never be forgotten. Your own nation has already faced a currency collapse. When this event transpired, security was not derived from the trust placed in the paper money within your wallet. Rather, it stemmed from retaining value that the system could not inflate away. France stands as a stark illustration of how revolutions can obliterate currency faster than any war. In the late 18th century, during the tumultuous 1790s, revolutionaries dismantled the monarchy and seized church lands, subsequently issuing a new form of paper currency known as assignats. These notes were theoretically backed by the value of confiscated properties and were intended to stabilize the economy. However, instead of achieving stability, the government resorted to printing them indiscriminately. With each new issuance diluting the previous ones, prices surged uncontrollably while wages lagged behind. Before long, assignats lost their worth entirely. Farmers began refusing to exchange food for paper currency, insisting on goods or silver instead. The streets of Paris erupted in bread riots as the revolution eventually consumed its own progenitors. In this financial debacle, victory did not belong to those who held patriotic notes. It was instead claimed by individuals possessing food supplies, gold reserves, or tangible property, assets that the government could not simply manufacture out of thin air. For the average Parisian citizen, this crucial lesson arrived too late. Promises, no matter how noble they may seem, are only worth what others are willing to accept in return. When trust crumbles, savings do not merely diminish, they vanish entirely. Fast forward 2 centuries, and this lesson resurfaces dramatically in Asia. In 1997, what began as a speculative attack on the Thai baht escalated into a full-blown regional crisis. Thailand found itself deeply ensnared in substantial dollar-denominated loans with unwavering confidence in its fixed exchange rate system's durability. Yet when that system collapsed under pressure, foreign currency debts became unmanageable almost overnight. Investors fled for safety as currencies across Southeast Asia, including those of Indonesia, Malaysia, and South Korea, plummeted in a cascading effect. Economies contracted sharply. Unemployment skyrocketed as governments turned to the International Monetary Fund for assistance. The most severely impacted were not the global hedge funds that instigated the panic, but rather ordinary citizens whose savings evaporated before their eyes. Many found that their mortgage payments had doubled overnight while job opportunities dissipated like mist in sunlight. Yet amidst this turmoil emerged a painfully familiar pattern. Those who held dollars or foreign assets fared significantly better than those who placed their faith solely in local currencies. Take, for instance, the Byzantine Empire, often regarded as the eastern counterpart of Rome, which remarkably endured for a millennium after the fall of its western counterpart. Central to its economy was the gold solidus, a coin so reliable that merchants across Europe and parts of Asia accepted it without hesitation. For centuries, this currency stood as close to a global reserve currency as one could find in the medieval world. Countries reliant on external debt were compelled to implement stringent austerity measures, while Wall Street institutions managed to offload Asian assets at rock-bottom prices without facing dire consequences themselves. This stark contrast highlighted an unfortunate reality. Financial crises often spare those at the top while disproportionately affecting everyday people trying to build a life based on trust and stability in their economic systems. As history has shown time and again, understanding these cycles and recognizing their implications can mean the difference between survival and ruin during tumultuous times. The lessons learned from these past events serve as critical reminders for future generations about safeguarding their wealth against unpredictable shifts in economic landscapes. What initially appeared to be a localized disaster was, in reality, a widespread redistribution of wealth. This lesson has been illustrated throughout history in various collapses, from the fall of Byzantium to the economic turmoil in Argentina. Debt denominated in foreign currency is a perilous trap. When storms of crisis arise, it is not the creditor who sinks but rather the debtor. By now, the picture should be unmistakably clear. Whether considering revolutionary France, the American Civil War, or contemporary events in Asia, familiar themes recur. Paper currencies invariably collapse. Debt ensnares nations and families alike. Survival does not belong to those who place unwavering trust in the system. Rather, it favors those who recognize its fragility before catastrophe strikes. What is most unsettling about history is that collapse is not merely an ancient or distant phenomenon. It is occurring right now. In Lebanon, between 2019 and 2021, banks committed acts that still seem unimaginable to most people in developed countries. They locked their doors. Citizens awoke one day to find their deposits frozen, withdrawal limits imposed, and their currency plummeting. The Lebanese pound lost over 90% of its value virtually overnight. Lifelong savings were reduced to mere coins. Desperate individuals queued outside banks pleading for access to their own funds only to be met with the heartbreaking news that their money no longer existed. This predicament did not solely affect small depositors. Entire middle-class families, retirees, doctors, and engineers, those who had trusted the financial system, found themselves utterly without resources. The harsh lesson was painfully clear. Your bank balance is not a treasure chest, but rather a loan you have extended to an institution that may decide during a crisis not to return your money at all. Those who fared best were either individuals who diversified their investments overseas or those who owned tangible assets like gold or real estate or kept cash safely outside the banking system. Everyone else found themselves ensnared by circumstances beyond their control. If this scenario feels remote or unlikely, it shouldn't be surprising. In 2008, Americans watched as their homes were foreclosed upon and their retirement savings obliterated, while the banks responsible for initiating the crisis received taxpayer bailouts. During 2020, amidst a global pandemic, trillions of dollars were printed to keep the economic machinery running, a rescue operation that inflated asset prices for the wealthy while ordinary wages stagnated. In 2023, regional banks across the United States collapsed almost instantaneously when depositors lost faith in them entirely, serving as a stark reminder that the notion of too big to fail is merely a comforting fiction we tell ourselves until that fateful moment when doors close permanently. So how can one safeguard against such widespread failure? History reveals that there is no single answer to this complex question. In Byzantium's case, it was gold that provided security during tumultuous times. It stands as a testament to the enduring appeal of tangible wealth amidst uncertainty, and serves as a reminder of the importance of prudent financial practices in an unpredictable world. As economies fluctuate and systems falter, being prepared with diversified assets can make all the difference between thriving and merely surviving through crises yet to come. However, astute observers might note that one would expect the Byzantines to have learned valuable lessons from Rome's earlier downfall related to the silver denarius, an instance where emperors consistently debased it until it became little more than tin disguised with silver plating. This cautionary tale has been recounted numerous times throughout history. Shockingly, centuries later, the Byzantines repeated this very error with gold itself. They began diluting its purity and incorporating cheaper alloys into their coins. Following the catastrophic event known as the Black Death, opportunities arose for acquiring neglected lands. In Florence, there was a profound skepticism towards bankers deemed too big to fail. Meanwhile, in the Confederation, durable goods became the focus of trade. In France, the essentials were food and real estate, while in Asia, individuals sought to avoid debts denominated in foreign currencies. Lebanon witnessed a rush to divest from banks before they could potentially collapse. The dynamics may shift over time, yet the fundamental truth remains. Survival hinges not on blind faith in paper instruments or institutions, but on recognizing what holds genuine value when illusions disintegrate. Herein lies a paradox that should awaken you. A collapse can simultaneously represent both tragedy and opportunity. For the unprepared, it signifies disaster. However, for those possessing resilience, liquidity, or tangible assets that cannot be manufactured at will, it becomes a moment to amass wealth at a fraction of previous prices. After the devastation of the Black Death, many peasants transformed into landowners as an abundance of land contrasted starkly with a scarcity of laborers to cultivate it. Similarly, post-2008 financial crisis saw those with capital seizing homes while millions faced foreclosures. History teaches us that safeguarding oneself is not merely about defense. It also involves positioning oneself strategically to seize what others are forced to relinquish under pressure. Wealth encompasses more than mere possessions. It also includes capabilities and skills one can offer. Survivors throughout history were not solely defined by their gold or material goods. They were those adept at creating value when others could not. The baker who continued producing bread, the craftsman able to repair tools, the farmer who could sustain his community. These individuals thrived during tumultuous times. Merchants capable of transporting goods across borders were not just survivors. They flourished amidst chaos. In every crisis, monetary value tends to diminish while production retains its significance. People still require sustenance, shelter, commerce, and livelihoods. Those who can meet these fundamental needs seldom remain impoverished for long. This represents a profound form of protection. It is not rooted in blind trust in institutions or reliance on governmental or banking salvation, but rather in a blend of tangible assets and practical skills combined with an awareness that illusions are ephemeral. Each crisis marks a transition, from those who placed their trust blindly to a select few who were prepared for change. It represents a shift from paper promises to concrete values, and from passive savings to proactive builders of society's foundation. Time and again, history reveals this pattern of transformation. Therefore, the real question is not whether everything will collapse. Such occurrences are an inherent part of existence. The real question is whether you will be one of the many who remain bound by empty promises or one of the select few who actually bring something meaningful to life. History does not repeat itself, but if you choose to overlook its lessons, it will inevitably crush you under its weight. If this insight has sparked a new way of thinking for you, consider how you might embrace it. The past holds invaluable truths. I will guide you on where to uncover them. At first glance, no one seemed to notice this subtle shift in quality. Gradually, though, cracks began to appear in public confidence. The coin that had served as a backbone for Mediterranean trade transformed into just another political construct devoid of real value. As trust eroded, so too did the stability that had once defined the Byzantine economy. What remained intact amid this turmoil? Not flimsy paper promises nor decrees issued by authorities, but rather traders who quietly amassed tangible wealth, gold or land situated beyond imperial reach, managed to preserve their fortunes while others watched helplessly as their money dwindled away into nothingness. This enduring lesson extends beyond ancient empires. It reverberates through modern financial landscapes as well. Individuals today must cultivate awareness regarding where they place their trust and how they manage their assets amidst shifting economic tides. The importance of diversifying one's holdings cannot be overstated. Wise investors recognize that tangible assets often provide better protection against unforeseen upheavals than abstract financial instruments or state-backed currencies. In conclusion, while historical precedents may seem distant from contemporary realities, they remain relevant reminders of humanity's recurring struggles with economic stability and trustworthiness in monetary systems. Those who learn from these past missteps stand a better chance at weathering future storms than those who remain complacent in believing that today's assurances will last forever. There exists a fundamental lesson that echoes throughout history. Governments often succumb to the temptation of diluting their currency, and when they do so, the true value seeps into assets that cannot be easily replicated. Yet, it is important to recognize that not every economic collapse can be attributed solely to the mismanagement of currency by those in power. Occasionally, calamities arise from unforeseen upheavals.